Book 2, Herzeloyde. Reading theme, Glory. Garmaret set out for Toledo, of which his cousin Calet was king, but upon arriving he found that the king had left in search of tournaments. How long Garmaret travelled to find his cousin we do not know, but it was finally in the land of Valais that he saw the encampments of foreign knights, Calets amongst them. Herzeloyde, the queen of Valais, had called the tournament herself, proclaiming that the winner would marry her and rule Valais by her side. The news reached the queen's entourage that a complete stranger from a distant land was about to arrive. His attendants, both French and infidel, are elegant. They bear themselves proudly, and their clothes are very fine, well cut, there is no denying it. I was with his squires and found them above criticism. They say that if anyone needs anything and petitions their master, he will part them from their cares. I asked who he was, and they told me straight that he was the king of Zazamank. The queen wondered why this king did not come in to greet her, but Garmaret was in search of Calet. When found, the cousins embraced warmly, and Garmaret asked who was amongst the knights come to the tournament. Calet told Garmaret of many noblemen. Here I shall name a few connected with those we will later meet in our story. King Uther Pendragon has many Britons here, yet one thing sticks in his flesh like a thorn. He has lost his wife, mother of Arthur. The lady went off with a priest well versed in magic, and Arthur chased after them. We are now in the 3rd year since he has lost his son and wife. But his son-in-law Lot of Norway is here, an adept in chivalrous combat, and a noble, sagacious knight, who is as slow to do a treacherous deed as he is swift to pursue honour. His son Gawain is here, not yet of strength, to do deeds of arms. Calet turned to his cousin. Here too is Sidegast of Legroy. He and his allies oppose me fiercely, but I shall rely on you. Remember your kith and kin, and help me by the love you bear me. The cousins parted to their quarters, but soon came news that 2 proud warriors were jousting in the meadow. This promptly led to the Vesper tournament, and other knights began to gather on either side, and upon hearing this, Garmaret set out to join them. By the time he arrived, the charging squadrons had grown broad and long, as like 2 armies facing one another. For a time, Garmaret hung back, observing how the 2 sides met one another in jousts and sword-play. The noble sport was near enough for the ladies in the palace to watch the warriors toil. Then Garmaret, apparelled in the finest armour, joined the fray. He expended many lances at full tilt. He cut clean through the other's charge and out at the far side. He thrust many distinguished men over their croppers and obtained their surrender. All those knights who bore the cross of poverty reaped the benefit of the hero's labours, since he gave them his captured horses. The fighting was now so near that Herzeloyde was able to see clearly who were distinguishing themselves. Spears splintered, and the sound of splitting and cracking filled the air. As the day wore on, the going grew very rough. Various noblemen were running or walking in armour. They had had their hides tanned for them with kicks and cudgels. Their skins were black with bruises. Contusions were the prizes these fine warriors got. The field was of short green grass sprinkled here and there with flowers. Falling upon this were such knights as had been destined for honour. Garmaret rode out of the battle, unlacing his armour to give him a breather. A chaplain and 3 pages approached, sent from France. They addressed Garmaret graciously and handed to him a letter from their queen Amphilisa. Garmaret had known Amphilisa in his youth, and it was her favour he carried when first he was engaged in chivalric training. A deep affection lived between the 2. Taking the letter, and at the sight of her hand, he bowed. Would you care to hear what it said? I, who have been disconsolate ever since I knew I loved you, send you love and greetings. The passion you inspire in me is a lock and bar on my heart and on its happiness. I am dying of love for you. If your love is to elude me, then surely love will do me mischief. Return, and from my hands receive a crown, sceptre, and kingdom that have been bequeathed to me. The love you arouse has won it for you. I also wish you to be my knight at Valais. If this comes to the eyes of the queen there, what do I care? It could not harm me much, for I am lovelier and mightier than she, and know how to lend love's exchanges more charm. If you have a mind to cherish a noble passion, then in return for love requited, taking my crown. Garmeret complied at once with Amphlisa's request that he should be her knight, and sent the chaplain and pages to rest in the pavilion before returning to exert himself on the field. Wherever Garmeret met with opposition, he was victorious. He thrust kings over their croppers, and pushed back his enemies in the tournament. But however easily knights went down before him, I would find it pleasanter to gather ripe pears. But his happiness was short-lived, as from across the field towards him galloped a prince of Anjou, bearing the crest of Garmeret's brother upturned. Garmeret unlaced his helmet and cut no more paths through grass or dust with his attacks, so overcome with sorrow. The news came that his brother had died in single combat, and that his mother too had died, so broken-hearted was she at being left by all her children. Garmeret turned from the fray and went to his quarters in mourning. But although he had only fought for half a day, he had distinguished himself, and Queen Herzeloyde proclaimed, "Let all take note of my good will, for all are my kin through Adam's rib. Yet when all is said and done, I believe Garmeret's deeds have won most praise." They gathered all together in the palace, and the queen honoured all who had fought nobly, but gave the greatest honours to Garmeret, and claimed him as her husband. At this, the chaplain from Queen Amphilisa leapt to his feet. "By rights he is my lady's who sent me to woo him here. She is consuming herself in longing for him, and so has a title to love him. It is she who should possess him, since she more than all other women loves him." Much arguing ensued, until at last Garmeret addressed Herzeloyde. "I have a wife, ma'am, whom I love more dearly than life itself, the Lady Bellicana. But even if I had none, I would still know a way of eluding you, if my rights are to be respected." "You must give up the Mooress in favour of my love," said she. "In the sacrament of baptism there is greater virtue. Now divorce yourself from heathenry, and love me as our ties enjoin, for I am desperately in love with you. Or is the Queen of France to balk my claim? Her envoys spoke honeyed words. They made the most of their message, and played their game to the board's edge." Garmeret confessed his promises to Amphilisa too, but Herzeloyde would not be swayed. So the knight and the maiden, so my tale informs me, appointed an arbiter to hear the lady's plea. It was then approaching noon. Judgment was pronounced forthwith, that any knight, the which, being come into these parts for deeds of arms, has laced his helmet on and gained the palm, that same shall the queen have and hold. Although he was tormented by grief, Garmeret turned his eyes on Herzeloyde, and with a winning smile spoke these courteous words. "Madam, if I am to find life tolerable with you, do not chaperon me. For if my sorrows ever leave me, I should like to go out jousting. If you will not let me go to tournaments, I have not forgotten my old trick, how once before I gave my wife the slip. I wish to break a good many lances yet. You must allow me, madam, to attend one tournament a month." "Make your own terms, my lord," she said. "I shall leave you to do as much as you please." The queen and her ladies led him to where he found happiness, and all his sorrows vanished. Grief was discomfited, and zest in life renewed, as it must always be at the side of one's beloved. My lady, Queen Herzeloyde, gave up her maidenhead. Nor did they spare their lips, but began to consume them with kisses and ward off grief from joy. Being thus united with Herzeloyde, Garmeret laid down the barrack's crest and took up again the panther of Anjou. For some time they lived happily, Garmeret travelling overseas into the thick of battle, and returning to his lady when the fighting was done. One day Garmaret received a reliable message that the Baruch had been overrun by Babylonians. Thus he embarked for overseas and found the Baruch under arms. However much his journey grieves me personally, Garmaret was received with great joy. Of what happened there, Lady Herzeloyde knew not a thing. Her whole way of life brought her rich return of praise, and her modest ways were much commended. When he had been away for half a year, she was counting on his returning, but he was never to return. Such is the way of the world, joy today and grief tomorrow. One noonday the lady lay in troubled sleep, when a dreadful vision came to her. It seemed to her as though a shooting star swept her to the upper air, where a host of fiery thunderbolts assailed her, flying at her all together so that her long tresses hissed and crackled with sparks. The thunder pealed with loud claps and showered down tears of fire. As she came to herself again, a griffin snatched at her right hand, whereat all was changed for her. For now she marvelled at how she was mothering a serpent, which then rent from her womb, and how a dragon suckled at her breasts, and flew swiftly away and vanished from her sight. It had torn her heart from her body. Such terrors had she to behold. She awoke writhing and moaning. At this point, squires from her husband rode in, accompanied by numerous pages. Then happiness was no more. With weeping and wailing, they told her of their lord's death. It fell out that, resting from battle, Garmaret had removed his armour and helmet, and while he slept, an enemy had come, and with dark magic doused his helmet in the blood of a billy goat, whereupon the metal began to soften. When Garmaret took up arms again, the selfsame enemy had impaled him through the skull. Garmaret remained on his horse until he had ridden out to a field, where he died without reproach. The Baruch conveyed him to Baghdad, where he was entombed, a cross above his grave. Upon hearing this, many men of Valais wept for all to see. They had good cause for their sorrow. Herzeloyde was carrying a child that was already quickening in her womb, but they let her lie unaided. The child had been alive for 18 weeks, and its mother was wrestling with death. It was witless of those others not to help the woman, for she carried in her womb one destined to be the flower of chivalry if death will but pass him by. But then a wise old man forced her teeth apart, and they splashed water into her mouth. She returned to her senses at once. Herzeloyde swore to gather her strength and bear Garmaret's child. She doused herself with her own breast milk and with her tears. A fortnight later, the lady was delivered of a babe, a son so big in bone that she scarce survived. With this, the story has made its cast, and its beginning is marked. For only now is he born to whom the tale is dedicated. Now learn from where the hero of this story comes to you, and how he was kept from harm. They concealed him from knowledge of chivalry until he could think for himself. Herzeloyde nursed him herself, calling him bon fils, cher fils, beau fils. She rejoiced in the birth of her son, yet her gay spirit was drowned at sorrow's ford.